Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters. I'm your host Mitch, glad to have you here. Here at the Commander's Quarters, we're all about Commander on a budget. Today we have an episode of Requests for Quarters. On episodes like these, I take you through formerly budget Commander cards that I think really deserve a reprint. In order for a card to be considered, it has to have been under $1 in one of my deck techs. Although some of these cards may still show up in my decks, they're much harder to include now. This show and episodes like this one are possible because of viewers like you. So if you're looking for some easy ways to help support the show, make sure you like this episode and share it with friends. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Thank you to everyone who's already purchased our merchandise, it really does help support the channel. Another easy way to support this channel is by using our TCG Player affiliate links. So make sure that you're looking for those links in the description whenever you're buying a deck or just individual cards. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. But before we jump into this, I just want to make a quick disclaimer. I have absolutely no influence over what cards actually get reprinted in sets. As a budget player, I'm just giving my opinion on what cards I would personally like to see reprinted. These cards are going to be ordered based on the percentage that their price increased, and a cycle of cards will all be grouped together. Now that we're on the same page, let's get into it. Starting off at number 10, we have Sphere of Safety. It's an enchantment for 4 and a white, and it says, creatures can attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. This is a fantastic Ghostly Prison-like effect that can be even more impactful than Ghostly Prison itself. With a deck built around enchantments, this can make it nearly impossible for you to be attacked. And on top of that, unlike Ghostly Prison or even Propaganda, this actually protects your planeswalkers too. Sphere of Safety fits right into a deck like SRAM. In that kind of a deck, this pretty much completely protects you from any kind of an attack. For just 5 mana, a lasting effect like that is very powerful, especially one that can become even more effective as the game goes on. When that episode came out on August 11th, this was just under $1 at 99 cents. At that price, you definitely have to work to include it in the budget by cutting other pieces, but its effect is so powerful that it's well worth it. Unfortunately, today it's all the way up to $2.06. This makes it very difficult for me to include in any budget list. So the price more than doubled with an increase of 108%. This is a great card that I would love to see reprinted. Coming in at number 9, we have Night's Whisper. It's a sorcery for 1 and a black that says you draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. 2 cards for 2 mana and only 2 life is an incredible rate. Essentially, this is a Sign in Blood that's easier to cast that you can't target anyone else with. The vast majority of the time with Sign in Blood though, you're targeting yourself anyways. So if you put those 2 cards head to head, I'd pretty much pick Night's Whisper every time. Outside of mono black decks, Night's Whisper is much easier to cast on turn 2. Pretty much any deck with black should be considering Night's Whisper as a draw spell. Night's Whisper first showed up on this show in my Yargle deck, and as you can see, it showed up right next to Sign in Blood. In this deck, both cards essentially function the exact same way. The major difference between the two of them though is their price. Back on September 6th, the price of Night's Whisper was 79 cents. At that price though, you can still make room for it in the budget. But today the price is all the way up to $1.93. And at this price, it's a lot more difficult to include. That's an increase of 144%. Now black has a ton of efficient draw spells that are budget. This one just might be one of the most efficient ones though, so I'd love to see it reprinted. Coming up in 8th place is Farseek. It's a sorcery that costs 1 and a green, and it says, search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. In my last episode of Request for Quarters, I talked a lot about the need for efficient ramp cards. I won't get into too much detail here, but the gist is this. In my opinion, ramping on turn 2 is much better than ramping on turn 3. And that makes a card like Farseek very valuable. It not only ramps you, but it also fixes your mana. Now, outside of budget, this can be an extremely effective card since this can go get you something like a Shockland. But even in budget, this is basically a rampant growth and we'll take as many of those effects as we can. The first time that this card showed up was in Joda. That was actually our 2nd episode ever and it came out on August 1st. Back then, the price of Farseek was 26 cents. That made it pretty much an instant inclusion in any deck that runs green. I thought that its price would stay low for a long time, but unfortunately that's not the case. Today it's just over $1 at $1.10. To include Farseek in a deck at this price, cuts are going to have to be made. In total, its price increased 323%. Green has plenty of options for ramp, but Farseek is one of the best and I would love to see it reprinted. Next up, coming in at 7th place is Coastal Breach. It's a sorcery for 6 and a blue and it has Undaunted, so it costs 1 less for each opponent. It says return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. So most of the time when all of your opponents are alive, this is only going to cost you 4 mana in total. And a 4 mana bounce everything spell is extremely effective. It's especially effective in decks that don't mind things being bounced, or decks that have ways to get around this effect. A deck like my Nezahal deck was a perfect fit for this. Essentially you can bounce everything except for Nezahal. You set everyone else back while essentially staying the same for only 4 mana. That was actually the first episode ever for this show and it came out on July 27th. At that time, the price of Coastal Breach was only 52 cents. At that price, it was pretty much an easy budget include. Unfortunately, today its price is all the way up to $2.62. At this price, I can pretty much guarantee it's not going to show up in any more of my decks. Since the start of this show, this price increased 404%. This card was only printed once back in Commander 2016. It's a good card that can fit in a lot of decks and it definitely deserves a reprint. Coming in at number 6, there's Crown of Doom. It's an artifact that costs 3, and it says whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. In pay 2, target player other than Crown of Doom's owner gains control of it. Activate this ability only during your turn. This card is a fantastic card for Commander, and I love the design. As soon as you put this out there and give it away, your opponents are going to have a very rough time. If they don't pay to give it to someone else, they can have a lot of damage coming their way. And if they do pay for it, you're essentially taxing someone for 2 each turn. Since you can't get it back, this essentially makes all of your opponents into targets and leaves you untouched. This card works especially well in a deck like my Feldergriff deck. In that kind of a deck, you're just sitting back and making your opponents do your dirty work for you. For just 1 mana, you're going to give them a 1/1 hippo. But with this in play, those hippos are essentially 3/1s. Because of this, it makes it a lot easier to take out players quickly. That episode came out back in November, and at that time, its price was 75 cents. Unfortunately, today, its price is well out of budget at $3.87. So you won't be seeing this card in any of my decks anytime soon. The price of this card from November has increased 416%. Like Coastal Breach, this card only has 1 printing. That printing was way back in 2014. So in my opinion, that reprint is long overdue. Next up, coming in at 5th place is Eerie Interlude. It's an instant that costs 2 and a white, and it says, exile any number of target creatures you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. This is a very flexible card that's fantastic in a lot of situations. This is great board wipe protection for any non-token creatures you control. Being able to pick and choose your targets with this is a very powerful effect. On top of protecting your creatures, you can definitely use this to abuse effects too. Any kind of blink or flicker deck is going to love this card. Getting all your enter the battlefield effects again for only 3 mana is huge. This card first showed up on the show in Arcades. In this deck, it was great board wipe protection, and it also could draw you a ton of cards. Back on August 23rd, it was an easy include at only 45 cents. Today, unfortunately, it's all the way up to $2.97. The jump from 45 cents all the way up to $2.97 is an increase of 560%. This flexible card could definitely see play in a lot of budget decks if it's reprinted. And now we're on to number 4 with Timur Sabretooth. It's a 4/3 cat that costs 2 green. Pay 1 and a green, you may return another creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, Timur Sabretooth gains indestructible until end of turn. This card is amazing at protecting some of your key creatures. 2 mana is a very small price to pay for that effect. On top of that, you can easily abuse enter the battlefield effects with this card. Simply bounce one of your creatures that has an ETB you want and recast it. Green decks usually have access to a ton of mana, so you can easily abuse this. This first showed up in my Vivictus Asmati deck. Back on September 8th, its price was only 24 cents, but currently it's jumped all the way up to $1.64. It still can be squeezed into a budget if needed, but a lot of cuts have to be made for it. And there aren't too many of these effects in green, so sometimes you're kind of stuck. Since September, this price has increased 583%. I'm looking forward to the day that this is a budget-friendly card again. Next up and coming in at 3rd place is Krav the Unredeemed. He's a 3/3 demon that costs 4 and a black. He partners with Ragnar the Redeemer, and you can pay a black and sacrifice X creatures, and target player draws X cards and gains X life. Then you put X+1/+1 counters on Krav the Unredeemed. Krav is an amazing sacrifice outlet. Now, free sacrifice outlets will pretty much always be better than ones that cost mana, but Krav is really close. For 1 mana, you can sacrifice any number of creatures. Next to free, that's pretty much the best that you can do. On top of that, you're going to draw a ton of cards and gain a lot of life. And because that's not enough, Krav gets huge. This sacrifice outlet can also be an engine for you. The first place that Krav showed up was in Azoni, and back on October 18th, its price was only 73 cents. For such a powerful effect, I was definitely willing to pay that price. But the second that Taste of Karlov was spoiled, its price skyrocketed. Today, it's all the way up to $5.37. With that kind of a jump, the price has increased 636%. There's no way for me to include this in one of my budget decks without a reprint. But now it's time to move on to 2nd place with a Panorama Cycle. There's 1 for each shard, so there's Jund, Esper, Crixus, Bant, and Naya. Each of them do the exact same thing, but for their shards' colors. So let's just illustrate their effects by going over Crixus Panorama. It's a land that taps for colorless. You can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic island, swamp, or mountain card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So since these lands come into play untapped, you're not set back at all. And the land itself can help you fix your mana for a very low cost. On top of easy mana fixing, these also really come in huge for landfall decks too. Pretty much any budget multicolor deck is going to want these for its colors. These showed up back in our deck tech on Joda, and they were very cheap. Back on August 1st, the cheapest one was 11 cents, and the most expensive one was only 23 cents. Pretty much each and every single one of these now is out of budget consideration. Crixus Panorama went from 11 cents all the way up to $1.25. It had the highest percentage increase out of all the panoramas. Its increase was an astounding 1,036%. The reprints on these panoramas have been pretty sporadic. 2013 was the last time that Esper and Naya were actually reprinted. I think the entire cycle is definitely due for a reprint. But finally, we're at number 1 with Domineering Will. It's an instant for 3 and a blue, and it says target player gains control of up to 3 target non-attacking creatures until end of turn. Untap those creatures, they block this turn if able. This card is extremely effective in a lot of situations. It's a great defensive card that can allow you to steal someone's blockers and use them as your own. You can even use it to get blockers out of the way. You can also use it to get rid of some creatures too. There are just a ton of different applications for this card. It showed up in my very first deck tech on Nezahal. Back in July, it was only 29 cents, and I always expected this to be a budget card. I was definitely wrong with that assumption because the price is now $3.32. The only printing of this card was back in 2014, so this is definitely in need of a reprint. In less than a year, the price of this card has increased 1,045%. I think a single reprint of this card could definitely put a dent in that price. In my opinion, each of these cards were fantastic budget inclusions at one time, and with some reprints, they definitely could be again. But I really want to hear about what your thoughts on my requests are, so why don't you let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, let me know which card you want reprinted the most. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more updates and sneak peeks on future episodes. Links to our social media accounts can be found in the description. Also in the description below is a link to the Commander's Quarters Patreon page, and I just want to say a quick thank you to the patrons who have subscribed so far. There are many benefits to being a patron for the Commander's Quarters, including being able to vote on future Commanders for deck techs. There's even a general level tier where you get your own personalized deck tech dedicated to you. I truly couldn't do this without all of your support, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, check out some of our other episodes on budget deck techs, Quest for Quarters episodes, Commander topics, and Creators Quarters. And with that, I'm out of here. Thanks again, and have a good one.